Hey, it's Nikori. Hi, Nikori. How are you doing? Hello, everyone else. Welcome back to WIP Wednesday, a weekly feedback event for environment artists. How's everyone doing? How is everyone on this beautiful Wednesday? I failed my preparation for the stream, by the way. I don't have a question, so we're gonna think about a question on the spot. Hi, Sheila. Hi, Pipu. Hi, Tim. How's it going? Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you. It's been freaking hot over here. I mean, not freaking hot, but it's definitely heating up. Like it's what was it? Like almost 30 degrees today. It's getting pretty toasty. I'm standing up. I got like a fan blowing at my legs right here, so yeah, Nacho was suffering through the day as well. He basically lay in front of the fan the entire day, so trying to keep cool. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Aloya. Happy to all see you back here. It's good to see you all. Yeah, it's been pretty toasty. I've been what have I been doing today? Like I've scheduled the next workshop to go out. So that one has been on the backlog for a little bit. It's one with Nina Kloss. She's a technical artist, and she did a workshop a while back on how to make a good technical art portfolio. So, and also not only technical art, but also more generic portfolio advice as well, and career advice too. That was really awesome. We had that workshop a couple weeks back. And then I still needed to do the edit and all the setup, but that should be going out as we speak, actually. Let's make sure that it does. Patreon, yay! Yes, so it went out. That's awesome. Yeah, so that's been awesome. I've been doing some editing, some cleaning up, some audio cleanup. What else have I been doing? Been doing a little bit of personal work, working on my own scene, and then also playing a bit of Diablo as well. Bought that yesterday. I've been having fun. But yeah, how's everyone else doing? Maybe, Okay, so the random question of the day, since I'm in this Diablo mood anyway, right? Like, what is your favorite Blizzard game up until date? Like, if you've never played it, that's fine too. But what's your favorite one if you have one? Vibu, Tim, the one-man production house. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a production house. It's I'm grateful that all the guests that we have on have clean audio setups, so the editing is kind of on the minimal most part. Hi, Dots! Oh, the environments in Diablo 4 are freaking gorgeous. Yes, I'm getting like a lot of inspiration for my medieval environment. And I've been tweaking my textures to reflect what I'm seeing in Diablo 4 a little bit more. Because my textures were like a little bit flat. And I kind of wanted to like remedy that a little bit. So now I've been really upping the depth on the textures as well, so it's gonna be good. Aloya liked Hearthstone. Awesome. Never played Hearthstone myself. I did. What are some of the games that I played? So I played a little bit of Heroes of the Storm. Played half a month of WoW until I got permabanned because I got hacked. What else do we have? Overwatch, the first one, for a little bit. And then obviously Diablo. I think honestly that's what put Blizzard on my radar. Wasn't necessarily WoW, but was Diablo for me. Like I've been playing it until like since Diablo 2. So yeah, I'm really liking the more grittier feel that the new one is going for. So Yeah, I've been enjoying it, really. And it's like Dots was saying, like, I keep walking into environments and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I can zoom in on like all the different bits. Ugh. I guess it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like, we just can't look at environments in a normal way anymore. What I like about the environments in that game is the constant use of heavy contrast in whatever they do. Like, I'll be a bit more specific. Like, when you look at the textures in that game, like, they play a lot with contrast, right? Like, they add like lots of mud and like lots of very shiny materials and then break it up with like very rough materials again, like wooden planks and stuff. So you get like nice contrast and like lots of variation in the environment. It's super cool to see. And I think they, I don't know, I need to properly look into this, but I feel that sometimes they even like use that as a way to guide you, where they paint in like specific like shinier spots to like draw your attention and then keep you going. Just really awesome. Yeah, I would love to do like I don't know, not a video or something like that, you know, but I'm definitely gonna dive into it and see yeah, just see what I can figure out. It's gonna be awesome. Anyway, let's get back into it. Let me switch over to the overpaint screen. Hi, Andrea. Happy to see you here. How are you doing? Got a couple of people on here today. Let me check if we have all the people in here, because there was some last minute change up. So let me make sure that we got everyone here. Should be good. Hi, Damian. Great to see you back. I'm actually gonna start with the first one here from Sheila. There's probably not gonna be like a bigger update because Sheila's saying that she just did a small update. Just changing the block out around a little bit and then also putting in the first texture pass for the walls, which is looking great already. Let me get back to Discord. Then I want to add a couple of variations for the stones with some moss. Nice. Yeah. Let me just have a look. Oh, the arches are looking way better as well. Compared to last time, right? It feels like the focal point of the scene now, which is awesome. So great job. Let's see. There's probably not gonna be too much on feedback this time, right? Because you didn't really. It sounded like you were just doing like small updates, just like keeping us up to date. Yeah. Nice one. Oh, okay. There is So the first thing is this arch. Great job on that so far. That's looking awesome. Not the arch, but like the main window, right? It's looking really nice. And then I'll have a quick look at the texture, right? And I think this is a tricky thing, right? Because you want to add some character to the tileable texture, but you can't do it in a too unique way because then it becomes like very repeatable. Right? Like I'll bring up an example here where you can see these tiles here. They're really obvious in their repetition because the damage on them is so unique, right? So you gotta keep that in mind. Gotta watch out for repetition. So a way to break that up is you have one clean stone, right? That has none of the destruction in it. And then you have another version of the same stone with the same dimensions and the same pattern layout, but then you make a destroyed version of it. And then what you could do is use vertex paint to blend between the two, so that you can basically pick and choose where you want like more damaged areas and where you want to just have the clean material on it as well. And the vertex paint can also be used for, I think you were mentioning something like moss, right? And I want to add a couple of variations for the stones with some, yeah. So you could do the same thing there with vertex paint again, where you could paint like certain areas with moss, and you could even, let's see, what's the easiest way of explaining this? You could even use the height map, so like the depth information of the tileable, to dictate, or like the stone tileable, just make sure, like you could use the height of the stone tileable to then indicate or like drive where the moss is going to be drawn if you start a vertex painting, right? So what that does is basically you can set it to appear in the cracks first, and then the more you paint, like the higher it's going to be according to that height map of the tiling texture underneath. So you could get like some really interesting looks where you have like moss seemingly growing out of the cracks of the stone and like spreading in certain areas. Could be a very cool look. Very cool. So I'm gonna make a note of that. And also, don't be afraid. Like, I don't know if you tried this already or not, right? I don't know if you have experience with this, but vertex paint is super simple to set up. You literally just grab a vertex color node in Unreal Engine and use that to drive like any masking that you're gonna do later on. So the simple thing would literally be you use the red channel of the vertex color. So whenever you paint like a red value onto your vertex color, it's gonna change, right? And then you drive that into a lerp, like a linear interpolate, which basically switches between the top and the bottom layer. That's it. That's the simplest setup of it. And if you wanna, you can also do that with a material blend function. That's like the more advanced, but it's still like a single node in the engine, where you can, instead of blending single textures, you can blend entire materials too, using the same vertex paint. And that comes with like a bunch of inputs you can play around with. Antonio is saying the texture's looking very big for me. I think the cracks could make them into decals. Nah, not really. Like, decals you would use for like very unique stuff, right? Where like if you want to have cracks, I mean you could, right? But a decal in that case would probably be better if you have like a very unique looking section that needs to be destroyed. So let's say, I don't know, let's say you have like a bunch of damage over here, right? Very specific damage. That would probably be a decal. But if you just want to add cracks to a tileable, it's probably better to make a second version and then blend between them with vertex paint, because that's going to give you like more flexibility as well. It's a good suggestion though. Like, that's the thing with game dev, right? Like, there's so many applications and there's so many use cases for it. That, yeah, that's definitely a good option too, in certain use cases. So yeah, that vertex paint, and then using the height map, that is gonna be super useful for you in this scene. especially because there is going to be like a lot of foliage and moss, and you kind of want to massage that into the stones, right? So you would probably have like a vertex paint setup where let me bring up the concept again. This is an overpaint that I did last week, but it serves a job. So yeah, we can see that you have like a lot of moss, right? And you would probably want to have like meshes that you spawn, but those meshes then also need to be embedded into the wall itself. So it's nice to have that flexibility where you can paint areas in with vertex paint and then add meshes on top of it to kind of blend them together in like a really satisfying way. Yeah, cool. Cool. I'll leave you with another tip as well. Look into parallax occlusion mapping. We've kind of talked about height maps already, right, in this session. A height map can also be used to drive parallax occlusion mapping, which again, a simple node in Unreal, and it comes with like a bunch of it kind of looks daunting, but it's actually not, right? Like the main thing that you need to take into account is that you have like a height map and then like a whole bunch of customizations. But you can actually use that to fake depth in your stones, where it's gonna take that data and like it's gonna do a depth illusion. Like it's basically gonna be a magician for a little bit. And it's gonna yeah, it's gonna just give the whole material some depth. It's gonna look good, especially on flat surfaces. It's gonna look real nice. The caveat there with parallax occlusion mapping is that usually it breaks down when you're looking at it at like a glancing angle. So let's say you have a straight wall and you're looking at it from like an angle that's almost the same angle as the wall itself. That's when the illusion usually breaks down. So what we do in those cases, and I think this thing up here is a perfect example, right? So let's say you were to add parallax to this wall. What you would need to do, and this is something we talked about last week as well, is you would need to just add like unique stones on the edges to kind of hide that effect. So I'll see if I can find quickly find an image from my project, just to showcase what this actually does. Yeah, so this is a flat piece of geometry, right? Like this, no tricks, this is just a flat piece of geometry, and then the parallax is kind of giving it the depth that you would expect from like a lot of geometry normally, right? And then you can kind of see what I mean with you kind of have to hide the edges, because you can see all the way at the edge here. You can kind of see that I've made pillars, and these pillars are made out of geometry. And that's only because if you were to look at that wall at a glancing angle, you would see the parallax, right? And it would kind of destroy the effect. So that's why those pillars are there, to kind of keep you from looking at those glancing angles. And yeah, like massage the two together, right? It's like game dev is you're selling the illusion of something looking almost like real life or stylized or whatever, right? Like as you want it to look, with these clever tricks. So yeah, that would be like the second piece of advice here, and I'm probably gonna stop talking now because I mean I'm just throwing more stuff at you. I don't know how to spell this either, so I think it's with one R. And again, this is literally this name. If you're making a material, this is the name that you want to look for, and that's going to show up in your material editor graph. And you then need to plug the end that says UVs into your UVs, and it will do like all the heavy lifting for you based on the height map that you give it, right? So yeah, that's going to be awesome. That's going to look good. Yeah. I'm going to make a little note here. Hide edges, just to make sure that we don't forget about that. Yeah, but honestly, Sheila, like, awesome work. Keep up the great momentum. Keep doing what you're doing, because you have like a really good momentum, and I'm looking forward where this is going to be next week. And thank you so much for sharing your work. It's awesome. No worries. We have a question in the chat as well. Kiro the Cursed, I want to build an environment artist portfolio too, but I'm having a hard time finding something that catches my attention but will also be a good piece. Any advice? Yeah, sure. So, scrap part 2 of that equation. Like, because I feel that a lot of people focus on what makes a good piece and what is unique and what isn't been done, and like you end up in such like an overthinking process that you're basically locking yourself from actually doing a thing that you would enjoy doing, right? So I think focus more on the first part and then see how you can make it within like a decent sized scope. That's more important, I think. As to finding something that catches your attention, this is an interesting one because that's a very personal thing. I would say you would have to look into what motivated you to become an environment artist in the first place, right? What did you want to do? And what are the things that interest you? Is it sci-fi? Is it historical stuff? Is it, you know, like, try to find what interests you more than the other, then do like a small project around it, and then figure out if it really was the thing that you wanted to do. And if it was, then you keep going. If it wasn't, then you do something different, right? In a different style or with a different thematic. And then you just keep iterating until you really found what you wanted to do. That's the way that I look at it. But yeah, I think the most important, and this is very general advice, is you gotta really, yeah, it sounds so cringy, right? Like, you gotta follow your heart when it comes to this. Like, it's kind of what I did. Like, for a lot of the time, I was like, oh, cool, I want to do foliage now, you know? So I did a project on foliage. And then I wanted to do something else, so I did a project on that. Yeah. Does that make sense, Kira? Feel free to ask any follow-up questions, though. Because it is a good question, but it is also a very personal one, right? So the stuff, not the stuff, but like the advice that I give here is always going to be super generic, because I'm not having a one-to-one conversation with you necessarily, and I don't have any context to what your current skills and your current situation is, right? So the best that I can do in these situations, when we're talking in like a live stream right now, is to give you generic advice, and then hopefully something in that like resonates with you. Andrea, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, to not put too much pressure on yourself. Yeah, that's why I wanted to move away from the second part of that question, right? Because, oh, what is a good piece? Oh, what could be like the banger from my portfolio? And it's like you're adding this weight on your shoulders already, and you haven't even started yet, right? So that's why I say move away from that first part and focus more on like, hey, what do I actually want to do, right? Like, what I mean, it sounds so ridiculous, right? Like, what do I want my 5-year plan to be, and where do I see myself in this industry, right? Like, what do I see my day to day as? And try to work towards something like that, right? And that's gonna change and evolve over time. Yeah, that's fine. You know, I think it can be demotivating when you push yourself to a limit that causes exhaustion and demoralization. Yes, yeah, that's also what I'm a big advocate for, right? Like, in the beginning, usually our choices are not very rational. I'm talking about the beginning of your artistic journey as an environment artist, right? Our choices are not really rational. They're more like, oh, environment art, I want to build worlds. Okay, I'm gonna make worlds. Cool. Open Unreal, we'll start building a world, and then it's like, what am I doing? You know, like, it spirals out of control really quickly. Yeah. Can I ask how you deal with opacity on Unreal? I've been having trouble with opacity looking right in the engine as it does in Painter. Depends. It depends on the setup. I have written an entire document for Unreal Engine 4, but I know that's outdated now. But there's like a whole bunch of little toggles that you need to set in your material to have it look good, basically. There is, I don't know what it's called, but there's like how the surface will react. So I think standard is set to forward shading. You have to set that to per pixel translucent volume or something like that. It's going to give you the best result when it comes to like dealing with opacity. But man, like, opacity is such a rabbit hole because it gets really complex really quick, and engines are not good at sorting triangles in the engine yet. That's what we're running into right now with one of our projects that we're doing. Is we have a water cooler bottle, right? So you want to see it has one layer of transparency, and then you see the other layer of transparency, but it can't sort. It can't sort out like the different faces correctly yet. Like to read that document as well? Yeah, sure. It's on my ArtStation though. Send the link real quick. But that's the thing, like, keep in mind that a lot of this stuff has changed. Because there's a whole bunch of new settings inside of Unreal Engine 5 that you need to be aware of now. Alright, so focus on what interests me and what I want to make, and slowly iterate until I'm happy with the result and look for feedback. Did I get that right? Yeah, let's make sure. Let's dive into the nitty gritty. Slowly iterate until I am where I'm happy with the result, and then look for feedback. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It's a good way of looking at it, for sure. And then Martina is saying, how... hi. How would you personally differentiate between junior, mid, and senior in terms of skills in environment art? Oh my god, Martina. This is the last question, and then we'll move on to like some more feedback. But keep the questions coming. I love to discuss these though. It's just I also need to do some feedback too. It's very tricky to answer that in a way that's going to be actionable, because the truth of it is that a lot of companies have different goals and different mentalities when it comes to like the differentiation between junior, mid, and senior, right? If you want to see like a generalized overview, we actually have written that on our website. Let me share the link as well. You can hear. Yeah, that's the link to like the seniorities overview. It's very roughly, right? Very roughly, I'll give you the overview of, as a junior, you're not expected to like own anything necessarily, or not be, you're basically learning at that point, right? So your responsibilities are purely going to be getting used to the engine, getting used to making art, like doing art full time with the help of seniors and mids, right? And then as soon as you become a mid, like there's an expectation that you can be like self-sufficient, and that you can be left alone from time to time, right? And like own certain smaller things when it comes to the development cycle of a game. And then from a senior point, like that's when you really become like the owner of things. And you're going to be setting benchmarks, and you're going to be driving the team forward and helping mentor like juniors and all that stuff. So that's like the really rough outline of it. There's some more details in the link that I just shared, so feel free to check that out as well. But yeah, it's I'm gonna say you right now that the stuff that I just said is more like an ideal case scenario. And there's a lot of people in chat, I know this 100%. There's a lot of people who are going to be in the chat that disagree or are in a position where that's completely not the case, and it feels like what I just said was wrong. I can guarantee that. Because there are junior positions where they don't necessarily have the senior people to like train up the juniors, right? So the juniors are more left to their own devices in that case. There's also going to be the opposite, right? Where there is like a large support structure and the junior can take a bit more time, you know, which is the ideal case scenario. But yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate the question. It's just that the answer is sometimes very tricky when it comes to reality. Yeah. We love to make things complicated. That's the thing, right? Like the games industry is not like, there's no standard ways, right? Like one company, let me give you a quick example, right? Like one company can look at the seniority structure in a way of junior, mid, and senior. But there could also be another company who says like, hey, we don't want to do that stereotypical structure and we want to have more steps. So they'll do, let's give an example. Junior environment artist 1, junior environment artist 2, mid environment artist 1, 1, 2, 3, and then senior 1, 2, 3. Yeah, some other companies also go a little bit further. They expand the track and they add principal or expert like after senior, because usually from what I've seen in companies is that from senior you kind of get a taste for both management and art. And there's people in senior positions that are like, I don't really want to manage. So they'll go the expert track. They'll focus on art. And then you have people that do the opposite, where they're like, hey, look, I want to really help people. I want to become a lead, and I want to focus more on like the managerial aspect. They'll go towards like the lead position or associate lead or something like that. Yeah. One last thing on that topic. If you were by any chance asking this in terms of, should I apply to an intermediate position when I'm just a junior? Yes. Do it anyway, because you never know if a company is going to be like, oh, cool, their skills are really good, let's hire them anyway. Right? So yeah, fire any shot. And yeah, like a no is guaranteed, right? But you can always get a yes. Joshua, how are submissions made for feedback here? So all these submissions that we're seeing on screen, they're made from people inside of our community. So you can become a member yourself by becoming a YouTube member or going to our website as well. Okay, cool. Next up, we got Arden, who is looking for some optimization techniques because they have never created a game-ready asset before. So yeah, let's dive into it. So before I go into that, let me grab a bit of water because I'm thirsty. Pretty good advice, thank you. No worries, Martina. No worries. And best of luck if you're looking for a job. Okay. So, because you've never created a prop before, right? I'm gonna do like a really quick overview of how this all works. Very quickly. So, usually the way that it works is you create a high poly first. Wait, hold up. Let's even take like a step back, right? So the way that the usual prop creation workflow works for unique props is that because game engines are restricted in the amount of things that they can render on the screen, we need to do like a very convoluted way of like optimizing the resources so that the engine actually can render out all the stuff in like a very performant way, right? And the way that we usually do that is we have our object. Usually this is what we call the high poly, and this is like the object, how it looks with like all the surfaces and like all the little details on top of it. And then what we then do is we use that mesh to then convert that down to a low poly. And then we combine all of those things with the baking process, right? So what a bake is going to do is we're going to transfer all that high resolution detail from the high poly mesh onto a mesh that has less geometry to work with, but that geometry is going to be replaced by something that fakes geometry, which is usually the normal map, right? And based on that, we can make like a whole bunch of other textures to kind of replicate like the surfacing aspects, right? Because we can't use like raw geometry to like fake the surface response of something. We just can't. So yeah, that's why we have to bake stuff down from a high to a low poly. So yeah, that's just like a really quick overview of that whole process. I told you it was going to be really quick. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into it, right? So what I would suggest for the high poly is that you would want to make it in a way that is close to how it's made in real life. So what that means is that if you have like a separate element in real life, you would also want to make that as like a separate element in 3D, because that's just going to give you like a better look instead of trying to do like everything in like one model, or like one geometry group, right? You would want to split all those elements out if possible. So kind of like you're doing here, right? Like this is going to be a separate element. Cool. So I'm going to split this into like all the pieces. So we got one, we got number 2 here, and then we got like the body of it. And we're gonna recreate the manufacturing process. Not all the time, right? We don't need to add like all of it, but we are going to require like a solid base so that we can then translate that onto our low poly. So yeah. So we can actually see some of it here, right? Like we can actually see, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell from the blurriness of the pictures. So this is an area where I don't know if this is one object, but you want to separate it out to like 2 separate objects. You want to split this out into 2 separate objects, because if we then do that, like we're gonna get this, if you really look closely, right? And this is where the magic happens in 3D. Because I should even say this, like where 3D doesn't look like 3D anymore is in little touches like the one that I'm gonna point out, where this thing is just slightly further out than the bottom piece, right? So that's why you want to make that in like a separate thing, because then you can kind of move stuff about and it's just easier to work with as well. Also, this is also like a separate object, right? So I don't know, I can't really see where this connects to, but let's assume that it goes to the back. Right, and that thing connects to there, because you can probably lift that up and then replace the roll that they use for like the receipts, right? Like all those things should ideally be reflected in the high poly, because they're gonna look way better if you then bake them down into the low poly as well. Plus you have like more control over the bevels and all that stuff too. There is another way that you could do this, but I think, I don't know, it's highly likely that it's not going to look as good as if you were to make it in your high poly, and that's by doing it in Painter, right? With just like a normal decal and just like adding like a little trim. That's going to fake this little section in the normal. But I would just put all the details in the high poly and make it look like really nice and clean. And these details that I just pointed out are going to be super important to get rid of that 3D feel, where something is like very rigid and very static, you know? Like these little elements are going to really make like something like this shine. You could even reflect that into your low poly as well. If you're gonna go like really up close, you would probably want to reflect that in there as well. All right, so we've kind of, oh, hold up. Sorry. I was going to go to another topic, but look at this, right? Like this lid, this being slightly misaligned with this one. That's such a nice detail. Like those are the things that really set like a lot of the props that people make apart from like all the rest. Like just the attention to detail. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so now Arden is at this point where he doesn't know how to optimize this for the low poly, right? So it's actually going to be very simple. Well, very simple, right? Like the rule here, or like the rule that I try to like follow the most, is that if it is important to the silhouette or like the shape of the object itself, then you want to reflect that into geometry. If not, try to optimize it out, right? So that means that you probably want this bevel to be here, right? So let me see. What is this? So you would, because this is the shape that we're looking at, right? So we kind of have, that's ideally something like this should be our low poly. Right? Where probably a little bit denser, but you get what I mean, right? Because you want to represent this lip should be present. And then also this curve should be present as well. So you kind of have to see at like what is like the minimal amount of geometry that I need to accurately depict the object that I have right in front of me. And that would be something like this. Right? If we then do this exercise over here as well, which already leads into an interesting comparison, right? Like the edges of this machine that I can see are more straight. So it's probably going to be you currently have like a very soft transition, right? But like the actual machine has like a hard transition and then goes into like a slight bevel and then continues upwards. Right? So like it's sharper than what you have currently. So that would be like the first thing to correct, right? Like again, really paying attention to like how something is built. And then just split that up into like how many edges you need, right? So that's probably going to be like one solid section of geometry, then the bevel. And then you would end up with something. You have like a couple of edges here. You would end up with like all these corner pieces are going to go to one point. And then these pieces are going to connect to something where it makes sense, right? So, for example, if you want to capture this in your low poly as well, like this edge would probably connect here. Whereas over here, it would probably connect to these buttons. Right? And then same thing over here, because this is just going to be like, let's say one big section, right? Then you got like a couple of cuts here. I mean, we're not going to do this for the whole object, right? But I hope that you see where this is going to. So like, again, like silhouette. I swear I keep writing it different every time. Silhouette is key. Right, you see, like all the pieces of geometry that I added today are all focused along the silhouette. Like all of this stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the silhouette at all, like that can just go. Like those are not needed at all. Right, and also when we're doing bevels, right? Like if you have like a tiny bevel like this, let's see. Because you have 3 edges here, right? Like in the low poly, you could even condense that down to like 1 edge. Unless you're going really close and you want to have another edge in there, like you could add another one, but I don't think it's going to be needed. For this small lip. So yeah, and then same thing here, right? Like you would I think this section is actually not too bad. So I think you can almost keep the geometry here and make the high poly a little bit higher. But yeah, like this stuff is literally just gonna be that edge, right? And then this would continue that way. Right? And that would be like simplest shape that we can get out of here. And then once you have this shape set up, you can then just do the same sort of thing with a consistent amount of edges on the main shape as well. The other thing that I want to keep in mind is don't think about topology as, oh, it's a certain kind of number or it's like a certain kind of limit that I need to reach. Think about it more as trying to be as consistent as possible and only deviating from that consistency if it's really needed. So what that means, give you an example, right? So let's make sure that we write that down first. So the first topic was consistency. And the second topic is deviate from that when it's needed. And then a couple of examples when it's needed. A couple of examples of when that is needed are things where you want to have detail, right? Like, so let's say details for close up. Or if you need additional geometry to get the bake to look good. Right? So one of the cases that I could let's see, is there actually a case? You probably want to add like a little bit of extra geo, right? Like, because normally what you would do is just a cube, right? But I think for these buttons, because they're sticking out slightly, right? So we're kind of counting it as like a silhouette piece. I would probably just give him like a little bevel, you know, especially on the sides, so that we're turning it from that into something more like this, right? So that you have like a couple more edges to play with. And you can just like really easily optimize it this way. Nice. Yeah, so that might be a case where it's all about the details, right? So if you want to have those buttons like really show up nicely, that's probably a good use case that you could have there. And if they're going to be rounded in that way too, you could even add like another edge here, you know, and kind of push it out. So that the button itself becomes a little bit bigger. You could also do that. But I think, yeah, I wouldn't go further than that, honestly. Yeah, so I think, honestly, those are the tools that I would give you. And then we can see how far you run with that, right? Because those are all the core concepts that you kind of need to know about to make a good high poly to then get be translated into a low poly as well. Yeah. So kind of what we talked about today is, or like right now, is do a little recap, right? Is follow real life by focusing on like real life manufacturing and how it's made, and then translating that into a high poly as well. Number 2 was attention to details, right? Details make or break something like this. And then the third one is gonna be I would say just like the core. Focus on the silhouette, let's call it that, right? Spelled wrong again, but hey. So yeah. That's what I would say, Arden. That's what I would say. Thank you so much for posting your work as well. Appreciate that. And I'll post this overpaint and like the link to this live stream in your chat as well. Next up, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit because I know that Sarah's watching. She's always watching. We're gonna dive into your work, Sarah. This is coming along freaking amazing. Great job so far. Let's get some context. Just finished some wooden crates and chairs. Currently looking for a new mesh for the bar's counter. I don't really like the scene anymore. Uh-oh. We're getting to that stage. I lost a lot of the original concepts post-apocalyptic, and I don't know quite how to get it back. My questions would be, how do I make the structural pieces, the walls, and the floor less flat? Should I go for decals, vertex paint? Should I make mesh variations? My props have a lot of grunge character and feels like the environment around them isn't matching at all. Okay. Yeah, it's looking great, Sarah. Oh, howdy, second favorite. Didn't see you sneak in there. So yeah. Okay. Let's start with number 1. Start with number 1. Let me make sure that I got my thingy up here. Oh, it's so tiny. Oh, you're welcome, Ahmed Arden. Great to see you here as well. So, topic number 1 was how to make the structural pieces less flat. Yes. It's kind of what we talked about before already, right? Like in the last person we talked about, like Arden's work, is you gotta look at how stuff is made in real life, and usually this is more like a game technique, so it's not necessarily represented in real life all the time, but transitional pieces make like a lot of sense in a lot of cases, right? Where with transitional pieces, I mean something to separate areas, right? And the area can be a lip over here, right? So let's say there's like a lip over here. What? Hello? Lip over here that's kind of supporting the roof, right? So you kind of have this little trim. It goes into the roof. You can do the same thing on the floor as well. Maybe make it a bigger one. Right, so that's not all the same. Those things can add a lot of like variation into the mix. Right, and we're talking about like structural. We're going to focus on the structural things first, right? I'm gonna call this transitional pieces. So those little trims can make like, can help a lot. Just let them continue all over the scene. And you don't have to do that much, right? Like what you can literally be is using the title that you have already in your scene anyway, and kind of have like a little curved lip. You know, so it would almost be something like this is where the edge is, this is where another tile is, and then that would connect, go all the way, right? So it would be like these red markers are like the grout of the tiles, right? So that could connect like all the way. Something like that. It depends on what you want to go for. So I think that's from like a structural perspective. The next thing that I kind of want to look into is scaling of things. I feel like we should have kind of started there. I know this might be not really what you expected of where we were gonna go, right? So sorry about that. But it's just something that really stood out to me. I'm not gonna linger too long on this, but add some mannequins into your scene. Because I have the feeling that this space, the height of this, is going to be very cramped. You know, and usually you want like a little bit more space. Like I can't even touch the ceiling, right? In just like a normal apartment. And this almost looks like if I were to stand in here, like I would be like scraping my head against the top of it. That's kind of what it feels like, right? So the reason why I bring that up is because that does a whole lot of like making the space feel really awkward and what is it, like unrealistic, right? It's like the foundations of the scene itself. So just throw a mannequin in there, see how it looks. That can already help a lot as well. Then now we're gonna get onto your question. Sorry for deviating for a bit. You were asking about how to make them less flat, right? So we're gonna go back to the first thing that we talked about today from Sheila. You can do a whole bunch of stuff here with a simple combination of vertex painting and decals. You don't even... I know that RGB masks are the hot shit, you know? That's what I use, that's what I see a lot of other people use as well. But you don't have to, right? Like, you don't have to at all. So what you could do is actually have... let's see. What is a better example here? Yeah, let's take this corner over here, right? So you could have nice tiles up until this point and then start blending between a tile variation that has like a couple of tiles missing and like a couple of damaged sections, right? So we're kind of breaking stuff up here, right? Like all these little areas are like just tiny little cracks. You don't want to necessarily overdo it, right? I think it's good to keep it kind of subtle, but we have like the one missing tile here, then a couple of chipped corners. Then maybe do like a couple of chipped corners here. This one in the corner is missing too. I mean, it depends, right? Like, just make a tileable that has like, let's say half of the tiles are missing or chipped. And then you can use vertex painting to just blend between them, which is going to look freaking amazing. I'll give you a simple example, right? Like, I did it like very quick and dirty in my, I want to say my last scene that I posted, but that's also 2 years ago, so. Let's see. So I'm using the same technique, right? This is in Blender, but it doesn't matter. It's still the same technique. No. So if you look at this, right, like I'm doing the same thing here where I have a tile that is like fully intact, and then at the bottom I just vertex paint between a tile that is like super damaged and super worn and all that stuff. So yeah, you can do like very cool things with just like a very simple setup, right? This is just flipping between two layers. So I have like an intact tile and a broken tile, and then all the rest that you see, like all the graffiti and like all the little like specific drips and all that stuff, is just all decals, like all planes that I just project onto the texture itself, right? You can use that to get like a nice little bit of breakup and to add like uniqueness to the whole thing. Very versatile too. Very versatile. And yeah, I mean, don't let me stop you from using more than 2 layers as well, right? Like you could use the red channel. So your base is going to be your pristine tiles, and then the red channel is going to be your broken tiles, and then the green channel could be like really dirty tiles, you know, like really greasy dirty tiles or stuff that's just been collecting dust for like ages. And you could then vertex paint those in like the top sections of the wall because people were too lazy to clean the top section of the wall. Something like that, right? So yeah, you could have pristine tile. You could also do that with decals too. So you could have decals where it's like, it's all grimy and smudgy down here. And then use the same kind of decals like under here. Right, just making it like really grimy and dirty. Or even, yeah, because these barrels have probably been here for a while, you know? Just have something like that, and then you could kind of fill up the corner as well. Right, and what we're getting then, because we're also adding those little lips and those little edges, we're getting a lot of interplay between elements, because those edges, they're gonna be attracting like a lot of dirt, and like a lot of stuff is gonna get stuck into it, right? So we're gonna have vertex paint tiles. And then I would probably keep these 2 decals, right? Decals are so powerful. 100%, Sarah. Start slinging them around in your scene. It's gonna look good. Yep. So you don't need to go overboard, right? Oh yeah, Sarah, vertex painting is so simple to set up. Like, it is so simple. Like, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the. If I were to recommend someone to get into material graphs, right, like shaders in Unreal, like it would probably be vertex painting because it's so simple to set up. It's literally just vertex color going into a lerp and then 2 colors, and then you got it set up. That's it. And then you would replace the 2 colors by whatever inputs you want, right? Cool. Yeah, so I think for adding uniqueness, if you then apply a lot of this stuff to the rest of the scene, that's gonna look really good. Right, where you just have, yeah, especially the floor, right? Because I mean, not the floor itself, but like large surfaces always need like a lot of breakup, because that's where you can spot the tileable, right? So think about spilled drinks, spilled food, blood, you know, post-apocalyptic shit, like mud, like, oh my god, you can really go crazy with the decals here. And like, you could even tell a story with decals alone in a scene like this. be very interesting. So yeah. Vertex paint. And then decals. Nice. Mesh variations. My prop have a lot of grunge character and it feels like the environment around it isn't matching that at all. Yeah, I totally agree. I think with this kind of stuff, that's gonna like massage everything together, right? It's gonna make it like a cohesive picture. So yeah, I totally see what you're saying, and I fully agree. And then we're moving on to the second topic. I recently found out through feedback that my metallics are not PBR correct. They have a value of 0.5 instead of 1. Oh my god. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how that happened. So I'm working on turning all of them into actual metallics, but it also created another issue where my metal pieces are way too dark. The thing is, when I look at sci-fi environments, Calypso Protocol, blah blah blah, looks like the metal is quite dark. My question is, how would I achieve that look when texturing? Usually what you would do is with metal, you don't want to go. This is where we're gonna get into like debate territory, right? But you don't want to go like all the way metal and then like super pristine. You want to make it like really dirty, right? Especially in your case, because we're talking about like the post-apocalypse. So in that case, and this is where the debate usually happens, right? Around this topic, where you have metal with like a dust layer on top of it. Like, is that dust then also going to be metal or not? Right? And I think that's where we're going to get into territory of like, you're going to end up with like weird values anyway. So I don't think the 0.5 that you had was an issue necessarily. However, it depends on how you're using it, right? Like, I think what you want to show off is if we're talking about a metallic surface that has like a dirt layer on top of it, that dirt layer is not going to be all over the place, right? So I want to see some places, let's say this table is a good example, where the edges of the table are going to be like very gross, right? People have been sitting on it and there's like all kinds of like stuff that happened on it. So this stuff is going to be gross, like the edges. And then the center surface is going to be a little bit more clean, right? So that's where the metallic value is going to be higher comparatively, because you want to have the interior surface a little bit shinier, right? So again, the tables are using a trim sheet. Yes, exactly. So what you would then do is kind of think about the technique that we used before, right? Is you would make the trim almost pristine. Well, not, I wouldn't say pristine. I think that's giving it like way too shiny, but like you want to make the base of your trim sheet like the metallic, the metalness on it, right? Or like the feeling of the metal should be something like cleaned up post-apocalyptic metal. You know, I'll let you fill in like how that's gonna look, and then the edges you can then again use decals, right? You could, in this case, so this is gonna be the base metal. And in this case, you could even look into using the same decals that you've already have for your scene, right? Like generic dirt and mud and all that kind of stuff. Maybe just stick with dirt for this table. And then instead of projecting them onto your asset in Unreal Engine, you then want to use a decal mesh instead. So you're gonna cut out like the surface here. So let's say this is like your piece of geometry, right? And then you're gonna map that in such a way that you have decals on top of it. And that would be like a couple of planes that are just bespoke to that mesh then. No, actually, yeah. Probably do it that way. You could also do vertex painting for this too, by the way. It depends. I think vertex painting might actually be easier. Where you just have like a dirt that you just paint on top of the table, you know? Could be very useful here as well. Yeah, so I'm gonna say vertex paint. The reason why I say vertex paint, and I'm kind of coming back to the original idea, is because decal shaders can be kind of tricky to have them look good, especially when you're dealing with the new Unreal Engine 5 system. It's kind of, yeah, they've kind of rewritten it. So yeah, I would say just vertex paint some dirt on top of those tables as well. And everything, right? Like the tables, the pipes. You kind of do like a lot of stuff with that vertex paint once you got it set up. Yep. Yeah, the original question, it looks like the metal is quite dark, so my question is how would I achieve that look when texturing? How would you achieve that look during texturing? So, there are, I mean, with Lumen, it's also dependent on the space surrounding it, right? So it's also going to be reflecting the environment into the metalness values, right? And the top of certain sections might be like very, very black, right? So that might also play into the whole thing. So take that into account too. But I don't think the metal here looks too bad, you know? Like if you tweak the textures a little bit, like I think you got a very good base, and then just dirtying it up, right? I think that's going to make like a ton of difference. Okay, and then moving on to the last thing, the lighting. So you're saying that the lighting is a mess. I want to go for something very dimly lit, but the scene would seem like it's mostly being illuminated thanks to the glowing objects scattered around, like the ceiling neons, the advert panels, and the neons on the table. How can I achieve this? Yeah, I mean, you've got all the stuff there, right? Like all the elements are there. I think they're just like too much at the moment. Like it's just dimming them down, like you said. Just making them like very subtle. Because I don't know what kind of lighting you're using currently, right? If you're using Lumen and the emissive objects are being calculated into Lumen, or if you're doing something else. Let's actually look here. Nah, I think you're still faking it, right? Yeah, so yeah, in that case you just have to be like way subtler with it, right? I would probably pick, so a tip that I was gonna give is to pick a focal point, right? Or like a couple of focal points where you want the scene to focus on, and then have the rest of it be like very dimly lit. So like an example could be these tables at the end, right? Almost have like a spot here, a spot there, and then the rest of it could be like very dimly lit again. Be cool. Yeah, there. Guys, we have no Discord for Beyond Extent, right? There is a Discord. Thank you so much for asking, Andrea. So, you can get access by just going to our website. I'll link it in the chat as well. It is through Patreon, though. Give you that caveat. No worries. Yeah. So I hope that helped, Sarah. I don't know about the lighting. I think the lighting we'll probably need to talk about a little bit more in depth. If you got the time for it, right? Because there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. You can go into I forgot where it is on the asset or the material where you say lighting from emissive, and then all your emissive objects are gonna cast light by themselves. Like it's a little tick box. I think on the object. I think so. But I'm not sure. It's been a while since I used it myself. But that might be worth looking into. Yeah, because that's gonna make like a huge difference. Lighting from emissive sounds super cool. I mean, yeah, that's 100% what you're looking for, right? That's gonna be exactly what you want for your scene. So yeah, I think it is on the asset. So check that out. I'm gonna look into it. Awesome, Sarah. Yeah, I know that we talked about a lot of stuff that was probably a bit unexpected, but I hope it was really helpful. And again, the props that you're making look freaking killer. I think with this vertex paint setup where you can dirty up like every surface, like it's gonna push it way more towards the props that you have. And that's gonna look awesome. Vibu is asking, does lighting from emissive work on baked lighting too? Yes, it does. Yeah. It did it work again on baked lighting? I think it still is the same, right? Like the size of the object and the intensity of the emissive have an impact on how much light it's gonna project into the scene. I think they changed that for Lumen. It was trickier in baked lighting than it was in Lumen though. Lumen you just take it on and it's like, oh, you know, it's almost real time. It's freaking amazing. Props do look amazing. Hell yeah. They look so nice. And then, hold up. We're not even looking at them properly. I mean, I gotta show this off. I mean, look at that. How cool are these props? This is freaking awesome. These are very nicely looking. Andrea is saying, pure chef's kiss. Hell yeah. Keep it up, Sarah. Keep it up. You're really pushing yourself, you know? Like, and I know that sometimes it might be frustrating, but man, I can tell you right now, once that vertex paint pass comes in, you're gonna be loving it. I guarantee it. Because that's gonna just push everything together. It's gonna look freaking awesome. Thank you so much for posting your work, Sarah. Appreciate it. I'm excited about this again. Let's go! Alright, let me take another sip of water because, dang it. Be right back. Alright, we're back. Open bucket with a wet spot will look nice in your environment. Yeah, that's awesome. Better late than never. Coming with the good suggestions. All right, last one. Copycat CG. Let's have a look. Couple of questions here. Lighting. I feel I could do a better job with my lighting, so any guidance on that would be awesome. I'm gonna mostly repeat what I was saying to Sarah as well, right? Is try to pick a focal point. And adding contrast as well. So I don't know if we can like really quickly. I mean, that's gonna look horrible. Let's have a look here. So good. Midtones. Because I'm feeling if you like bring certain sections down completely, right? With like maybe like a vignette or something like that. And then if we emphasize some other sections, right? It's a little bit on the strong side, right? Oh, maybe we can play those lights still have an effect. But then the overall scene has less of an impact on it. Just quickly. Right, kind of introducing some mood into it. Overall, the aesthetic looks really good. Yeah, I like it too. You see, like it's more focused, you know, and you can. It's not only the lighting, right? It's also your camera angles and like the propping that you have in your scene, and to kind of build it in a cohesive way that it kind of forces you towards like the nicest thing in your scene, right? Or like a nice composition, or like a nice. It's a better word here, like a nice. Yeah, I think composition is still the best word, but like a nice layout, right? Like you've laid out like a specific section that people need to look at, and then drawing the attention towards that. So it's the intent here, right? So we're kind of shifting the balance from like, oh, I don't know where to look, to like, hey, I'm kind of pushing you to look to like a certain area, right? I'm just gonna. So let's say for this one, right? Like we kind of want people to generally look over here. And you can kind of see that the rest of it becomes like less important because of it, right? Yeah, I think in the same vein, the composition needs to kind of follow along with that, right? So, oh, is that you, Pipu? Oh, I didn't realize. Sometimes it's tricky to keep people apart here. So, yeah, the composition and the storytelling is also, it needs to go hand in hand with the same thing, right? Because let's say for this shot, we're pushing people to look over here. We need to give them something to look towards, right? And I think, what was it that said it? Oh, Andrea said it just now. The gramophone looks really awesome, right? So maybe do something around the gramophone in your scene. Like especially in this shot, right? Because it's already here. Like if you can make it like really nice and shiny. And then have that as like the centerpiece of the stage, could look really awesome, you know? And then you could kind of tell a story of, I don't know, the story also doesn't have to be something like grandiose or like very impactful, or sometimes it can just be like, hey, it's a late night on this train, a couple is alone in the bar and they're listening to some soothing jazz music, you know? Like something very 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 personal, very intimate, you know? And then trying to like portray that through the stuff that you already have, right? So the reason why I picked something like that, because it kind of forces the gramophone to be a bit more involved than it currently is, right? So you could have the gramophone there because they're kind of listening to music together. They're kind of like just enjoying their time, you know? And then what you can then do is put these chairs like in a way together that you could kind of see like a couple sitting here, right? Listening to some cool music. And then you would have like two glasses of half poured wine with like a bottle of wine next to it, right? And then have the rest of it just gone, right? So that the focus becomes more on like this intimate scene that's happening here, apart from like the whole bar itself. Like you're trying to condense it down. That doesn't mean that you can't have anything else on the bar itself, right? You can still add stuff there. I think you always have to kind of look at it in terms of clusters. Because clusters are very useful. And I wanna just say this, right? Like this is a suggestion. Like if you have something else that comes into your mind and it's like, oh shit, this is a cool story too. You don't have to do this one, right? Like think about it, do another thing. I don't care. So feel free to still make it yours, right? I'm just giving you suggestions at this point. So the reason why I put everything so close together is because we have this kind of clustering going on, right? So that you have this little intimate scene happening here, and it's kind of a bubble, right? And that becomes the main focal point, and then you could still have like a bunch of glasses here that need to be washed up, and then maybe there's some other stuff here, you know, there's like a bunch of stuff over here, but you would want to leave a lot of this space. Let me actually just cut it out, right? a lot of this stuff. You kind of cut that out and you reduce the noise so that the focus becomes more on the thing that you want to show again, right? You do have to keep in mind that for this to work, you will probably have to take like a different camera angle too, because this is so far down the current frame that it kind of looks really awkward. So if you want to do something like this, you will have to change the camera and the composition as well. But I just wanted to say that the clustering. So what do we talk about? Like focal point? So you got your focal point and then the clustering. Clustering. And then storytelling, right? Like those are the things that we kind of pointed out in this one. And like this can become like a really nice intimate scene, right? You kind of want to imagine yourself on this train in whatever situation and kind of role play what you would be doing in that situation, right? So I brought up the situation where it's like a couple, husband and wife, like traveling on the train together and enjoying some music in the late evening. But you can also have a completely different story happening in over here, right? A guy by himself. Maybe he's just reading the late evening newspaper or something like that, right? Like a cigar, smoking a cigar, something like that. Or maybe it's happening in the next cabin over. There's like multiple... This is a scene where multiple things can happen. I also feel like the glass on my partition wall separating the bar section don't fit into the scene. Would love your opinion on that too. Oh, these ones? Yeah, they don't look great. The glass is tricky, man. Glass is very tricky. I would... So... If it was something like this, right? What I would expect, first of all, to have a frame around the whole thing, right? Like the glass would be in like a nice frame. And then the glass itself would probably be like very ornamental too, right? Because we got these very ornamental like motifs like next to the glass. So the glass would probably be like very, very ornamental too. It would kind of have like the same sort of patterns, right? Because I'm seeing this and I'm like, cool. I want to see something like very organic, very flowery inspired, like very yeah, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, that kind of style, right? Like very, very flowery. Those kind of patterns coming in because you see those over like everywhere, right? Like see them here and like next to the glass. So it might kind of make sense that the glass would have like those little motifs in them as well. Oh, a sneaky trick. Because okay, so what usually doesn't work is you have like a flat panel of a wall or like a glass piece, right? So these old glass panels are sometimes they have this really interesting edge to them where if we're looking at it from like the front, right? So let's say the glass panel is on the table and you would look at them straight on. Like it would kind of go up at the edges. and then you would have like the full panel, right? So the edge over here would look differently than the panel itself. It would probably be something like this, right? The reason why I bring that up is because if you have a lip like this, that kind of looks a little bit different in the geometry. If you then add like a slight refraction value onto your glass, that can look really interesting and kind of immediately give you the feeling that it's glass, rather than doing like this frosted glass. Because I mean that doesn't really fit, right, in like a very old school luxurious car like this. So yeah, maybe that could be an interesting one to look into. Like have this little lip on the glass. But glass is hard. Sure is. But that could be cool, right? So you could have the motifs be here, and then have like a little lip on the glass, and then you would have like the main section of the glass. Right, so it would be something like this. And that would be the lip where you can really see the refraction of it. Could be cool. Because yeah, that's what you're kind of doing here, right? I think here the issue is that it's just way too noisy and there's too much patterning going on for it to actually kind of look like glass. I think, well, window glass, right? I think this kind of glass works really nice if you have like an what did it call, like crystal liquor decanters, I think. So if you have something like that like a pattern like this would look awesome on that, but it just doesn't look good on, yeah, like a flat piece of glass. But yeah, check out the PDF that I wrote about it as well, that I shared earlier. Maybe that can be helpful. And there's a couple of extra tips that you can find if you just look up like glass in Unreal Engine 5, because now you can. There's also another tip that you can do with. I think, again, is it in the material on the asset where you can tick on. Oh, this might be even in the project settings where you have to tick on high quality reflections, and it will drastically change up like your reflections and how accurate they look. Super useful for glass. Yeah, but what else do we have here? So number one, we kind of talked about lighting. Number two, kind of talked about storytelling, right? We kind of already talked about it, so I think that's good. And anything else you feel looks odd, it needs to be changed or removed, and the overall feedback would be nice to have. I think, honestly, if you address the two things before it, like the lighting and the storytelling, and give us some stuff that really tells something, right? And have like dedicated corners where you're really showing off, like, hey, this is a story that's unfolding, or this is a story that happened here. That would look awesome. I think that's really going to elevate it, you know? Because the rest of it looks really nice. Some of the details, right? Like some of these wooden panels, for example. Again, the framing, right? Like if you have something like that, look at how it was made, especially because we're on a luxury train, right? Because I'm really getting that feeling. They would probably pay extra attention to having all the paneling and like all the plinths and like all the decorative pieces look really nice. Right? So yeah, just think about those little details, right? Where you would maybe have like, I don't know, maybe this panel would extend up here, and then maybe would like break into like multiple pieces, right? Something that makes it look like very luxurious, you know? Yeah, like all these little details look really nice, you know? Like all these little separations and transition pieces, they look really nice. Again here, same thing, right? I know it's very nitpicky, but like it's also going to be like relatively quick for you to do this, right? So giving it like a little lip or like a little edge or like a gold trim or like anything like that would be very helpful, especially because you have all the stuff here already, right? I'm assuming it has mostly trims anyway. Might as well apply it here then. Yeah, great stuff though. Great stuff. Very ambitious scene, right? I think you did really good. I'm really curious about the storytelling and how you're going to push that, because that's going to make like a giant difference. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, Pipu. And thank you so much for posting your work as well. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I think you're quite new to the community as well, right? So welcome. Welcome to the community. Thank you for posting your work. And I think... Thanks, Tim. No worries. Happy to help. And I think... it's going to be doing it for today. Yeah, someone else just posted something, but we'll talk about that next week. Because I hate doing things like on the fly on the stream. I want to set it up properly. So Shubham, in this case, if you're here, we'll talk about it next week. And yeah, thanks all for being here. Thanks everyone for the community posting their work, sharing their amazing updates, and asking feedback. I hope that it's useful. And as always, I'll post these in the individual threads that everyone has going. And yeah, I think I'm going to keep it quite short tonight because honestly, it's kind of hot over here. So I don't know if you noticed. So I'm going to be popping out. Thank you all so much for being here. Subscribe if you're new. Check out beyondextend.com. And yeah, stay creative, people. I'll see you in 2 days or else next week, Wednesday, for another entry of this. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.